I'll give you a minute to settle in before we start. Please mute your mics if possible. Feel free to open your camera so we can see who you are, but that's up to you. So I think people will still be dropping in, but I already say welcome back to the second day of our webinar series on retention and student services. We had an interesting session yesterday where we presented the ED2 task force report on retention. And we had two presentations by the Van Universiteit in Hagen and one by the Open University, both on retention. In case you missed the sessions, we'll be sharing materials later in the week. Today we have another two presentations, one by Aras from Anadolu University in Turkey, and one by Liz Marr, who's located in London at Code at the University of London. But we'll be starting with Aras first of all. Aras is a faculty member and researcher at Anadolu University in Turkey, and he will present on many shades of flexibility, which is about increasing retention rates at Anadolu. So please, Aras, go ahead.
Let me share my screen. All right, I assume that you see my screen. Okay.
Perfect, yeah, we can see it.
Hello, everyone. Today, I will present a speech entitled Many Shades of Flexibility, Use Cases of Giga Open and Distance Learning University, which is facilitated by EADTU. Who am I? I am an associate professor of distance education at Anadolu University, Turkey, and associate dean of the Open Education Faculty. Anadolu University is deeply inspired by the concept of openness, encompassing flexibility, equity, and democratization in education. Since its shift to open and distance learning in 1982, the university has championed accessibility and inclusivity for a diverse student body, both locally and globally. With over 2 million students enrolled annually, Anadolu University is not only the largest in Turkey and Europe, but also one of the largest worldwide. Our programs offered in more than 40 countries, which demonstrates the Anadolu University's commitment to global reach and lifelong learning. Managing such a vast student body comes with its own challenges, especially in terms of dropout rates. Anadolu University has strategically adopted flexibility as a cornerstone to address these issues, challenges, and ensure student success. Flexibility at Anadolu University isn't one-size-fits-all approach. It spans multiple dimensions from pedagogy to curriculum design to financial accessibility and communication strategies, which ensure every student can find a way to succeed. Pedagogical flexibility allows students to choose between synchronous and asynchronous learning formats, self-study materials, and interactive online sessions. Beyond academic learning, Anadolu University supports students' personal growth through learning communities focusing on art, science, and technology. Curricular flexibility empowers students to align their education with career goals or personal interests. Students can retake courses for better grades, pause their studies, or shift between degree levels if needed. These options allow learners to progress at their own pace, which offers an unparalleled adaptability. Temporal flexibility ensures that learners with work or family commitments can access education when it suits them. Self-paced and asynchronous courses let students set their schedules, while synchronous options remain available for those seeking real-time interaction. Spatial flexibility means location is no barrier. Students can study from home, rural areas, or even another country, Exams are also accessible with options for local test centers, home-based proctoring, or tailored accommodations for learners with disabilities. Anadolu University embraces both high-tech and low-tech approaches, from interactive digital books to printed books or different learning materials. This dual strategy ensures inclusivity, addressing the digital divide while enabling seamless learning even during global crises like COVID-19 pandemics or natural disasters like earthquakes. Students have access to 24/7 support through chatbots, call centers, and personalized responses via a request system. Important updates are communicated through SMS, mobile apps, or social media to ensure that students are always informed and supported. Anadolu University's financial flexibility includes affordable tuition and fee waivers for students with disabilities or those affected by crises such as earthquakes. Accessibility, flexibility supports students with special needs through adaptive materials, universal design, and dedicated exam accommodations. Our university's multifaceted flexibility addresses the unique needs of its students, boosting motivation and reducing dropout rates. By prioritizing flexibility, Anadolu University sets a global standard for inclusive, open, and distance education. Thank you for attention. I am happy to answer any questions after this presentation.
Thank you, Aras. Thank you for this overview and the presentation on Anadolu. I was wondering, yesterday we talked about what actually constitutes a dropout, and I was going to ask you actually the same question, Aras. What does a dropout mean in the case of Anadolu University?
Indeed, dropout is a relative term. I mean, there isn't one single definition here on our side, because some people leave the system, I mean, as we know, but some people just pause for a while. So it is really a challenge to identify the dropout students. And we also believe that on a system at a large scale, we have many options to go into system. And because we are flexibility, we also have many options to stop or drop out. Sometimes we say that many of the students are not drop out, but they are indeed stop out. I mean, they just pause for a while. So I don't have an exact answer, but for us, it's a relative term, and we see that being dropout is part of flexibility.
And that also means maybe a follow-up question that, like, yeah, saying like numbers on retention rates and how to improve them is maybe also difficult to put exact numbers on it. Yeah, of course. Are there any other questions from the room for Aras? We have some time for this. You also feel free to use the chat or raise your hand if you want to take the mic. Not at the moment, I think. Liz, you open the mic? Did you want to mention something? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was just looking for where my hand was.
Sure, no, go ahead,
I've got
please.
this one. Couldn't find the one on the screen. Okay. I don't want to give away too much of my presentation, but one of the things I was going to talk about was the curse of flexibility. So flexibility is great. How do you stop students being absolutely bombarded with messages and communications and offers of support, and how do you make sure that they can make the right choices for them?
Indeed, most of our communication channels are facilitated on demand. I mean, they can call our call centers. We have a system, and they can write their problems or request any support, and we provide personalized answers. We only use SMS. Indeed, to me, it's not a technology that people still prefer. But even we send an SMS, we don't send it to everyone. We just target, for example, a specific age group or disabled students or a specific program. So we don't send the message to everyone. When it comes to the mobile app, we use pop-up notifications, and we inform that they can control. I mean, if they don't want to take any message from us, it's all right. But if they want to reach us, we are always here. And this can be, as I told you, through call centers, or we have now an AI support to chatbot, and we provide some tailored answers. And at the end of the conversation, we ask them 3 times, were you looking for that answer? No, no, no. If they say no 3 times, then one of the people from the call center reach to the people. So this is what we do.
Thanks a lot, Aras. Any other comments or questions before we move on to Liz? So feel free to use the chat or raise a hand, whatever you like. Otherwise, we can move on to Liz, I think. Maybe, Aras, you can still stick around if you have time, of course. I know it's already quite late in the day in Turkey, later than for us here in Central Europe. Thank you, Aras, for your presentation. Then we move on to Liz Mar. She used to be associated with the Open University, but she's now a fellow at the Center for Online and Distance Education, or CODE, at the University of London. So please, Liz, go ahead. I think you're muted, Liz.
I was going to say, we just tested the slide, sharing the
Yeah.
slides, and it worked.
It worked. We'll take a minute. Don't worry. It's loading now.
Okay.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, I was thinking, oh dear, I'm going to be talking about the downside of flexibility here a little bit. So, but I think it's possibly an issue related to the size. So Aras was talking about a Giga university, which is a different scale of operation. However, so what I want to talk in my presentation about is the need for a different way of thinking about retention in online and distance education. And I've been working on a project which has been funded by CODE to look at student journey models. And I'm working with Elizabeth Burns and Christina Howell Richardson. And we have a couple of student researchers working with us as well. I'm defining ODE as open and distance, as online and distance education. So I know it says open in the title, but I want to substitute that with online, because open has a very specific additional dimension which adds to the complexity, but isn't necessarily common to all open universities, or indeed to all universities. I'm also making an assumption, I hope it's a reasonable assumption, that everyone has had a chance to see the EADT retention report, because I don't want to go over the ground that was covered in there while I'm talking today. So what I want to try and get through is this at a varying pace. So thinking first of all about traditional models and traditional approaches, and then thinking about the online and distance education context, and specifically focusing on some research challenges in relation to flexibility, in relation to student characteristics, and associated with flexibility also the paradox of choice. And then I want to, the last heading there, current thinking and suggestions. This is a work in progress, so I'm not near conclusions and recommendations yet, but these are just some interim thoughts and ideas. So, to look at a traditional student journey, it tends to be seen as cyclical, and you'll know from the retention report for EADTU, we use this model here. But there's an assumption that there is a cycle, and this kind of model is usually used as the basis for retention planning, and it assumes that everyone follows the same path through specific points, and it's almost the same assumption about the overall learner journey from primary school to college to university and then into graduation. So it assumes that students are on the same journey, and it assumes that students are experiencing the journey either in the same or very similar ways through being in cohorts of learners who are connected with each other. And there may be some optionality, but it's usually in quite a specific framework. But moving on from that, we know that the ideas about retention in higher education are often supplemented with thinking about things like student engagement, student belonging, commitment, and the communities that people belong to. And there's an acceptance now within the traditional models of a much greater acknowledgement of diversity in the student bodies. So we have age, disability, we have just a minute, I'm just going to move that so I can see that we've got people at work, we've got people who are living in remote communities, so they don't necessarily have digital access. And much of the thinking about that has been driven by a Bourdieusian position, which results in the belief that somehow we have to change the student rather than change the university. And that has improved lately, and there's less emphasis on changing the student, but I think that Bourdieusian lens still is still at play, both in face-to-face and in online and distance. When we look at the literature around retention in online and distance education, and particularly empirical studies on retention, we see either large-scale statistical studies or small-scale qualitative research. Small scale necessarily because you just can't interview that many people in the time that one has available. And then we see a mix of the two. And the problem with them is that they can't avoid the idea of individuality of a student and the complexity of their lives. So neither those, I was interviewed by the Office for National Statistics the other day for one of their large-scale surveys. And one of the questions was, on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy were you yesterday? And I didn't really know what to answer, so I just said, oh, 7. But the thing is that what use is that number in the context of all the other numbers that they're going to get? So that large-scale statistical stuff isn't necessarily particularly useful. And I have to say, even the interviewer agreed with me. So there you go. There has been work on developing things called personas or ideal types, which construct typical journeys. But I want to suggest that those might be okay for marketing purposes, but I don't think that they are particularly helpful for understanding persistence or attrition. And I wanted to just give an example here. I've listed on the left-hand side all the protected characteristics which we're familiar with under both UK legislation and also UN conventions. So those are the 9 protected characteristics. And then on the right-hand side, I've put some other influencing characteristics associated with the individual. So their employment status, how long it is since they last studied, what prior qualifications they've got, their economic circumstances, etc. So there's quite a number of influencing characteristics. And then what I've done on this slide is to show how complexity is generated just using 2 of those characteristics. So on the left, I've taken employment status, and that can be full-time, it can be part-time, somebody's volunteering, they're working shift patterns, they're self-employed, they're a consultant, they're retired, they might be a gig worker. So there's a big difference between somebody who's working part-time as a delivery driver and as a taxi driver, because the time that they've got available to them is different. And similarly, if you were thinking about their maybe they're elite athletes or they're in the armed forces. And again, that imposes different kinds of risk constraints, if you like. And then if you look at disability, I've only just listed a very few of the things that are protected characteristics under disability. But I think it's fair to say that how you might deal with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, which is a progressive and long-term condition, and visual impairment as being the same kind of thing, i.e. a disability, but they require very, very different responses. So that's just to illustrate, if you start to look at the intersectionality of all of those different characteristics, it begins to look very, very complex. And I was going to put a picture of spaghetti on there, but I couldn't find an image that truly illustrated just how complex all of that intersectionality is. So what was I going to say next? So the other thing about online and distance education, and that was the things that Aras was talking about. And I absolutely welcome the flexibility that is offered to students who wouldn't have any other options except to study in an online and distance environment. And it's that flexibility that enables them to do it. But there are also features of that flexibility which actually are designed to help, but can also confuse. So you can have multiple start dates. You can start anytime. You can have multiple start points. So you don't all start on the same module. You can have multiple module options. And in some institutions, some large institutions, the number of modules is just phenomenal and results in, I think, many thousand different possible routes through to the same qualification from the same starting point. You've got multiple optional engagement points. So they could be online, they could be face-to-face, but they are optional. And how does the student know which ones are the best to do? And there are multiple breakpoint possibilities where people can stand out. And it's helping students to understand all of that without actually overwhelming them with with information. So what I'm thinking was that what a student in this environment is actually finding themselves in a maze, and they have to find their way from one end of the maze to the other. And every student will have their own maze. So if you lay those mazes on top of each other and you've got all the different complications of the different routes, a student might meet another student or several other students at certain points in that maze. They won't necessarily meet the same students, and they could go through without meeting any at all. And that complexity is something that I think it's flexible, but it's also so complex that sometimes we find it difficult to get the messages out that we need to. So this slide I've used before, and the cone on the left shows the reduction in student numbers over key points in a typical student journey. So you'll see at the top, you've got 100% of students who've inquired. By registration, you've lost 15% of those. By the time you get to study and the first assessment, you've lost another 10%. And at the end of the year, you find you've only got 65% who've completed. So you've got that funnel, which kind of indicates roughly where the stop out or drop off points are. The things that students might find difficult or challenging. But I think what the actual experience is more like is like the vortex on the right-hand side, in which students are either flung off or jump out at multiple points in the journey, because every student is different and every student is having a different and individual experience. So if we start to look at then to overlay all of that complexity with the stuff that happens, I've called this, but this is stuff that we've seen in the EADTU report, and I'm not going to go through it all here, but there are active and active or passive causes of retention. So people deliberately saying, right, I'm going to step out because I suffered a bereavement, or I've changed my job, or actually this isn't what I thought it was. And people also passively withdraw. They don't tell anybody they're going, they just stop engaging and they disappear. And one of the problems for very large institutions is knowing when students are passively withdrawing or when they're just having a rest. So being able to catch them at the appropriate point. And then there's another area which I think is also important, and that's where students don't make the necessary academic progress, not necessarily because they are at fault, but because there are things that happen that prevent them from engaging with their academic studies in a way that is conducive to success. So just looking at the literature, this is from a culled from an article by Yilmaz and Karatas, why do open and distance education students drop out? And they've come up with, in fact, they were basing the work on Rovai, who would originally drawn a traditional model of attrition and found multiple additional factors which influence. And so it gets really, really complex when you think about the different characteristics, the different types of flexibility, and then all of the different things here around the instructor characteristics, the institutional commitment, course availability, all of those things that happen in a university make it even more complicated. And I'm quoting you here, Aras, if you're still here, because I was struck by this. There's neither a single factor can be held responsible for student dropout, nor can a single formula ensure persistence. So what to do? So you can put your head in your hands and give up, or you can think, well, what can we do? So this is my current thinking, and just checking on time. I have no idea where I'm up to, Stefan. Am I okay for time still?
Absolutely, yeah, please, yeah, definitely. You have time.
Okay, thank you. So, so my current thinking is that there is no single student journey in ODE or ODL. And I don't think there's actually a single student journey nowadays in traditional face-to-face HE. But I think the traditional part of the sector thinks there is and thinks there should be, and that's how they will continue to operate until they're possibly forced to change. That's a little bit controversial, but I'll put it out there. I think there are, in fact, many possible journeys, very many possible journeys. And although students might meet occasionally on a specific pathway, they'll probably diverge again. So generating a sense of community and a sense of belonging is really challenging in this environment. And we know that having a support system, a wraparound support system, is desirable. But is it feasible? And that's a question. I'm not saying it's not, but I just want to know how we can truly personalize at scale when we're talking about very huge numbers of students. And I think my other thinking is that there are things that we know work, and we've seen that in all the reports. We should be thinking about the things that work for some people and making those available to everyone. But being careful, not to do any damage by providing things that people don't need or find difficult because of their characteristics, but which help other people. And the other thing is beware of overwhelming students. So I think that it's not a cycle. I think I've come to the conclusion that the journey for a student through ODE or ODL is not a cycle, but it's a developing journey over time. And I've taken just the three pre-start, start, and proceed elements of that traditional model and highlighted what kinds of things could be provided in those areas which could support all students. They won't necessarily all take it up, but if we make it simple enough and accessible enough, the majority will hopefully find it helpful. So prior to start, making sure that we have diagnostics, but not 500 different diagnostics for each course of study, a set of sensible, pragmatic diagnostics that will help students to understand what their starting point is, but will also help them to understand what the implications of their subject choice are. Making available taster materials and assessment materials so that people can see what they're going to be experiencing. And perhaps having, like a chatbot, some kind of e-tutor guide on the side to help people through the process. And that could be through the entire journey. And at the start, keeping the module options limited so that you've got more of a cohort effect could be beneficial for students. And that's not to say that restricting them in subject choice, but restricting the number of modular start points within each subject area. So don't have 40 modules on communication theory. You don't need 40 modules on level, beginner's level communication theory. So think about what you do need and what students need to learn. Limit start points so that people are, I'm not wedded to this, but it's something that I think might help students. So rather than have 4, 5, 6 start points in a year, where it gives a student more opportunities to get lost. So keeping start points to a reasonable number. And also making sure that the first experience of assessment is low stakes, it's small, and support is offered. And when they proceed, things like milestone recognition, which I think Jill was talking about yesterday, and also using data to target support, which is in the EADTU retention report, is another one. For all students, look at the data. Use what you know about students. This is straying into data analytics, and there's some really strong evidence to suggest that data analytics can help to identify students who are at risk and will allow personalized support to be targeted. So look at the data. And also look at the module data. If you've got 40% of students failing a module every year, don't blame the students. Look at the module and see what's wrong with that, because that just shouldn't be happening. Think about how you engage students effectively and how you can achieve that through the module materials and other engagement opportunities. And don't make them compulsory. Make them so good that nobody wants to miss them. And that's a way of generating engagement. Make sure that your communications are simplified so that the important messages get through. And acknowledge all successes and encourage when things go wrong. And my last point, the holy grail of responses to retention is quite elusive. But one of the things I learned across my career is that talking to students and listening to students is a really great way of understanding how you can help them best to continue with their studies. I was going to say more about induction and other things, but I think I'll save that for another occasion and finish there.
Thanks a lot, Liz. Thank you. It's really interesting to see, your ideas about possibly limiting flexibility and personalization to a certain extent and presenting a new model. So this model you have described, is it more or less, I would say a model that you see fit for instance, the University of London, or also is it actually also a trend you're describing? Do you see this happening at the moment, that people move away a tiny bit from this flexibility?
The University of London hasn't moved away from it.
Okay.
In fact, I don't know any universities that have moved away from it, if I'm honest. I just think that looking at what happens in various institutions, we can see that flexibility does cause some problems. But I think that the more important point I want to make is that I don't think it's cyclical. So I think if we try to fit it into a cycle, which is iterative, then we're going to come unstuck because the student doesn't do all of the same things every year. So they're not new every year for a start. That it's not their first module of study. It might be their second or third module of study. So when thinking about things like, well, we had induction, we provided induction for students studying their first module. We don't want to make them go through it again when they're studying their second module, even though that might be a first module for other people. So how do you fix that? So how do you make that journey so that the student has the experience of all of the things that they need, but doesn't have it duplicated, and also has it at the point of need? So really thinking about, well, we know a student needs to know this, and this. let's tell it them all as soon as they've enrolled and hope they remember it.
Mhm.
Or hope they remember where to find it. It doesn't work, we know that. So so I think that reconceptualizing it as a developmental journey rather than an iterative cycle is possibly the direction I'm going, but I can be persuaded otherwise.
Thanks, Liz. Any comments from the room about it, or anything you'd like to ask Liz or discuss? Or if you're of a different opinion, that's fine too, of course. You can, there's a raised hand by Aras. Please, Aras.
During this presentation, I was considering that we both indeed emphasized the importance of multiple entry points. Approaching from this perspective, I believe that if we provide multiple entry points, we can also provide multiple exit points. So sometimes retention, dropout, these terms are part of this flexibility. And if this is a journey, sometimes people need to rest. And we can say, okay, you can rest. But if you want to go on to your journey, we are here to accompany you. This is what we are doing, what we are trying to do at our capacity at Anadolu University. And I feel that this is what many open universities do in that way. And another thing I want to add is, in many cases, even I do the same mistake, we quantify the dropout situation. I mean, we just look at the numbers. But in a university, I mean, in an open university, for example, at Anadolu University, we have around 1 million students. And even if I can reach out one single student, okay, I did my job. Because my purpose is to accompany them during their lifelong journey. This is what I feel.
Yeah, I don't okay, just on your first point, I absolutely agree about multiple exit points, as well as entry points, and hence the milestone qualifications that Jill was talking about yesterday, which was something we introduced at the OU. And it's about recognition and reward and those moments that matter to students and acknowledging them. And yes, stepping out can be good, but we have whether this is specifically a UK problem, but the Office for Students in the UK measures retention as well, effectively it's a condition of registration as a university that you control your retention and attrition. And the way they measure it doesn't allow for students to step out for periods of time. So it's very challenging. So coming back to what Stefan asked you earlier, Aras, about a definition of dropout, how you or I might define dropout isn't necessarily how the regulator will define dropout in any country. And then we have to act, even though we might not agree with their definition. But I think, and the other thing about providing you reaching out to an individual, and you and I would do that, but we have to make sure that everybody does it, because and that we can reach all of the students, because every student that comes through our doors, or our figurative doors, and achieves some kind of qualification is a positive outcome for the university.
Thanks, Liz. There's a comment from Prakash in the chat. He's basically confirming that there's some universities moving slowly away from flexibility. There's Open University in Malaysia. So he's saying, my university is slowly moving away from flexibility for a number of reasons, which are a certain level of maturity is essential to appreciate flexibility, and flexibility in itself can be rather overwhelming for learners who have just returned to learning. So this to a certain degree, confirming what you have analyzed, Liz. But yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about your ballet dancers, Aras. I was thinking, well, that's perfect flexibility, but I know I'm never going to get it. So
there's sorry, please go ahead.
Can
Aras,
I add one more thing? Stefan, you asked about the definition of dropout, but sometimes in our cases, our students come a few years later to the system, and we say, just like the motto from Rumi, come, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever you want. And the ones we defined as dropout somehow became a regular student. So it's a process. I mean, when we ask them the reason they drop out, they say they just wanted to pause because of psychological, social, or economical issues. So all we can do is to respect their decision. And that's why our priority is being as flexible as we are. In the end, this is their decision. But we are always open.
Thank you, Aras. Yannick from Teluk says, as a comment in the chat, he says, interesting, what are the results that you can see so far? In that case, I would say it's more of a model that you presented and maybe not so much, it's not so much been tested yet, I guess, at the University of London. It's more...
I'm wondering if Yannick is actually referring to Prakash's
all right.
comment.
That could be, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know, Yannick, if you want to take the mic shortly, feel free. If you want to explain your question shortly, or add it in the chat. I think Prakash is already
Prakash has
answering.
put
So
the answer in. So.
it was my fault for interpreting the question wrong. But any other questions for Aras or Liz?
That's an amazing increase. Although have to keep going further.
And it's still work in progress.
Okay. Thank you, Prakash. So, and for you, Liz, the research that you've been doing for University of London, is this continuing, and is this going to be actual advice to them, or how is it? What's the follow-up?
It's continuing, but I've had to scale back the work for personal reasons. But so in the first instance, we're doing some further literature reviews on student journeys rather than on retention. And to see whether there's what there is there, and then we will possibly recommend some small scale pilots that can be tried out at the University of London. But it is that holy grail, isn't it? Finding the answer, and I'm not sure that we ever will find the definitive answer. I think we'll find lots of really good things to do and to try, which will help us to improve. Because at the end of the day, and it isn't just about, we have to make sure that our retention rates are improved. It's about outcomes for students. And students make a commitment when they start to study. They can make a financial commitment, they make an emotional and a psychological commitment. And if something goes wrong with that, it's not good for them. So I think for the sake of our students, we need to make sure that we can do everything that we can, even if we don't find the ultimate answer. But I think Aras is absolutely right when he pointed out in his paper that there's a plethora of different experiences. So there isn't a single formula. It has to be a number of different initiatives.
Thank you. There's another question in the chat from Yannick, but it's actually to Prakash. But Prakash, if you want to take the mic to shortly answer to everybody, that would actually be welcome, if you're still here.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Nice.
I mean, success rate wise, I mean, it has improved, but it has improved due to several other reasons as well, and several other interventions as well, because we've also made changes to the assessment design, the assessment structure. We have tried very hard to improve on the personalized assessment structure based on the background of individual students themselves. So it's a lot of work for us from an academic standpoint, but it seems to work better for the learners, because for as long as the learners are concerned, every assessment that they seem to reflect on their individual background, work background, and whatnot. So in that sense, we have seen success, and we are hopeful that that will be reflected in improved statistics later on.
Thank you. That might be a nice topic for a next presentation by you in a webinar week or so, Prakash. Thanks a lot for that comment. If there's no other questions or discussions, then I would say we close off here. And then I would like to thank the speakers, Aras, Bozkurt, and Lesmar, for their contributions. Thanks a lot for being here today. And also to the attendees. Yeah, someone's asking, would it be possible to have a copy of today's presentation and yesterday's? Yes, so everybody who's registered to the event will get the links to the recordings and the slides, etc. So that's going to be later in the week. So I'd like to wish you Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I'll see you in 2025. Thanks, everybody.